Right, here we are, and I'm talking to Pat McGard at a late time of night. I'd usually be in my bed at this time of night, Pat, you know.
Are you serious?
No, no, not
Yeah,
yet.
of course you get.
It's only 5 o'clock. We could give it a couple of hours and I'll be in the bed.
By the way,
Anyway,
just
I was busy reading this excellent piece of work here. I don't know if you've seen it.
excuse me, you've just ruined my first question. I was going to ask what's its title.
Its title is Born on the 12th of July.
Can you,
And the
oh,
subtitle,
excuse me. Can you tell me who was born on the 12th of July?
I was born. That's right,
Oh,
rub it in. I was born on the 12th of July.
July.
I
Hey,
spent most of
Jude.
my young life trying to avoid the topic of birthdays coming up at
Aye.
all.
Hey, right. I'm going to ask you a question that I didn't tell you I was going to ask you. Can I ask you a question? What age are you?
I'm 80.
And why? You see, I thought
You're
you
probably
might
wondering,
answer.
how come I've got a teenage body?
Yeah, no.
I work
The
at it. I
question
work
is,
at it.
why did you wait until you're ready to write this?
Because I was too busy doing other things. Well, you see, I could give the reason that Edmund Hillary gave when he was asked why did he climb Mount Everest. He's supposed to
Because
have
it was
said,
there.
I don't think it's true actually, but he's supposed to have said because it was there.
Yeah.
And in a way, you could say that's why you write about yourself or write about your life. It's because it was there. You have a life. But I suppose in a way, I'm sure I'm not unusual. That, like most people, the days of my childhood and my teenage years are sharper in my head, more vivid than our decades after that. Do you find
Yeah.
that yourself?
Aye.
So,
Absolutely, Jude. You know, it's nearly true of all of us. We can remember things 50 years ago, but ask me what I had for dinner yesterday. I couldn't tell you.
yeah, yeah. So that was part of the reason I wanted to get it on paper. The other reason was that my father, when he was about 70, I asked my father would he write his life story.
Yeah.
He was not a man of letters, really, but he took a writing pad
Mm.
and he wrote for 2.5 pages, and then he got fed up with it.
And
Uh,
stop.
and he said, one of the lines that I remember from it was, in 1930, I got married. In the same year, I had bought 6 head of cattle for £7 each, and 6 months later, I sold them for 10.
Yeah, there was a cattle dealer.
Putting together the two, the value. I suppose the softer things of life and the commercial things of life. But like all Irishmen, he was scared of the emotional things, so he sort of
Yeah,
moved quickly away from
yeah.
it after he mentioned it.
Right, Jude. Tell me something. Right, we're living in a very, very different era now, and a different age, different
Yeah.
everything. And by the way, that's in the span of a lifetime. So, what was your childhood like?
My childhood was, well, I used to think I had an unhappy childhood, but then I
Yeah,
heard about other people's and I realized mine wasn't too bad.
yeah,
Um, you see, I was the last of 8 children,
yeah,
but there was a gap between me and the one before me.
yeah,
And the three before me were all girls.
yeah,
So, in terms of sex or gender, as they now say, I was different from the ones that were near to me,
yeah,
what were called the wee ones, the four at the bottom of the scale. And also in terms of the gap between me and the youngest of those, which was
yeah.
3 years. So although I was surrounded by them, especially these sisters, uh, they weren't really interested in things that I was. You're a boy,
Yeah.
you want to do certain things, and they weren't that interested in that. They were more interested in girlish
How
things.
many were in the family altogether,
Eight,
Jude?
eight altogether. It was called the big ones and the wee ones. The
Yeah,
big ones were my brother and eldest sister, who were born in Scotland, actually, in Glasgow.
yeah,
And then my next one was a sister, Patricia, and the next one was my brother, Michael. So those were the
uh,
big ones. And then there was twins, Philomena and me. That four,
yeah,
they were the wee ones. So
uh,
it's that period when we were wee ones that I'm
uh,
writing about.
yeah. What were your Jude? I have an idea what your, but there's no point in me answering the question. What were your parents like?
My parents
Were they
were,
traditional Irish type parents, Jude? That's what I'm asking.
I find it hard to answer that question because I don't know.
What do you mean you don't
You
know?
don't know parents from the inside if they're somebody
Uh,
else's parents. I'm holding this
Yeah.
up so people will remember. But my father was a kind of a distant, not a distant man, but he was very, like most people of his generation, I think, most Irishmen anyway, he was, the last thing he would be soft. And the thing, great pride people had was they never spoilt their wains. And that
Yeah.
would be the line he would have sort of taken. So I don't remember ever talking to him about anything really. Certainly when he was, until he was pretty old. But he was a, you know the way they say in some of these songs, like that I didn't see my father at the time he died, and I'm so sorry because I wanted to tell him I loved him and so on. I think that's for the birds.
Why?
I knew my father loved me, and I'm sure he knew I loved him, but we couldn't possibly have put it into words. If I'd said to him, "Daddy, I love you," he would have died on the spot from embarrassment. So that was my father. And my mother was of the same cut of the same cloth in a way. She was Donegal woman from Pettigo, beyond Pettigo, and she no, she had a soft spot for me now. I think because I was the youngest. And I think I was told by an aunt one time that I was she really wasn't. I wasn't supposed to exist. That it was essentially I was a mistake. Because she'd been told, I think, after the last child she'd had before me, that it might be dangerous to have another child.
Yeah.
Anyway, she got pregnant and she called me after Jude, hopeless cases. So it isn't true that she had one look at me and said, "My God, this is hopeless." She actually, I think, was giving, thanks to God or to St. Jude or whatever, that I'd been born, with
Jesus, Jude, if you were in America, you'd be traumatized with a name like that.
No trauma at all. So,
Jude, tell me, right, with parents, but you're avoiding the question. I presume they were religious type people, and there was no messing around or anything like that. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I'm not sure about my father. Like, he always said the rosary every night, like, and the trimmings, which are twice as long as the rosary. And he wouldn't have missed that. I mean, it wasn't that he wouldn't have missed it. It was like taking your clothes off and going into the bed. Something that just happened. And at Mass, he would have said his beads too. I don't know that he was a particularly religious man. He was certainly a traditional Catholic. My mother would have been religious. But it was religious in a pretty Puritan, almost Puritan sense.
But hold on, I've read that book and
what do you ask me these questions for? You've read the whole bloody thing.
Wasn't it a phrase your mother used that I am responsible for you if you do anything wrong?
Well, she didn't say that quite.
That's fairly Puritan.
She said, "I'll have to answer for yous to God."
Yeah, that's the point I'm getting at.
I think she didn't. Well, she. I don't think it was directed mainly at me. I think it was directed mainly at my sisters. I have 5 sisters, and though I say it myself, all of them are quite good looking.
Yeah.
And I'd say she was nervous that some of them would get into bother because not only would it be a mortal sin, but it would be also social damnation.
Absolutely.
So that was part of it. At the same time, like, I don't want to discredit her entirely. I'd say she was a very religious woman, and she believed in God. She believed very clear cut. You behave yourself in this life, and you got your reward in the next life, and that was it. So religion
it's not a nice thought.
Well, it's tidy and neat, but like Liam Whelan said about being in the IRA in the War of Independence. It was a glorious time, but it was a poor preparation for the rest of your life. And the same thing applies, or the long humiliation of life. In the same way, I would say, yes, things were nice and clear cut in our family, and loads of other. I'd say your own family probably too.
Very similar.
So that was good, certain days, but then time passes and you enter a much more complicated world. So I'm not sure it was the best preparation.
No, what I'm trying to get at here, because I'm setting up a couple of questions later on.
Yeah.
But the first, not the first thing. Did your father have a brother a priest, or did your mother have a brother a priest, There's some, isn't there priests and nuns on both sides or something?
Yes. My mother had a sister who was a nun, a Nazareth nun, no less, in England all the time. And she joined the nuns because she knew they worked with children, and she was very fond of children, you know. So she became a nun, and no sooner was she made a nun than they put her with old people looking after old people all her days. So she was a devout woman, but a very jolly sort of a woman too. She used to come to visit us, and she was very unlike the nuns that taught my sisters. My sisters were taught by Loretto, and they were very, very sort of I don't know, bourgeois, shall we say?
Yeah,
all for manners and nice decorum and so on.
Yeah, they were the nuns in the town I grew up in. I grew up in Letterkenny, and there was Loretto nuns around the convent, and they were very much upper class. They liked the people whose daughters were daughters of surgeons and doctors and lawyers and whatever. But
class system within the church.
Yeah.
My father had two brothers priests.
Yeah.
Now, one was a parish priest in Ballinascreen in Draperstown, County Derry. The other one, anytime I knew him, he was a priest in California, in Orange County, very right-wing part of California. Nobody ever quite explained to me why was he there? Why was he not in the Derry diocese too, like his brother? And I once talked to a man, and he claimed he knew him. He said that he was in the Derry diocese, but that he had made speeches from the pulpit at the time there was some trouble, you know, with the authorities. And he said something to the effect that it's nearly time we took the bull by the horns. In other words, you know, he was encouraging violence against the authority. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a possibility.
Well, wouldn't it fit the narrative that he was shipped out?
Yeah. No, I don't talk about them. I just mention them. I'll mention
No, Jude, what I was trying to get at, right? That's because what I was trying to get at. I've talked to you and I've met, but then in your own family, and your mother said that whatever you do, sort of, she would be answerable for it in this life. That set up your family because you had two brothers who became priests.
Correct.
What I'm trying to do is paint a picture of the family you grew up in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tell me about your brothers and sisters now.
Well, the two brothers became priests, but it wasn't that they were priests that made them distant from me. They were older, younger. There was 6 years and 10 years gap between me and them. And I mean, when I'm 10 and you're 16. I mean, you know me, you can point at all.
No.
And if you're 10 or I'm 10 and you're 20, there's even less, you know.
Yeah.
So it was, and besides that, when I was very young, like up till 11, they weren't about the house at all. They were off borders in St. Column's or at the seminary.
Yeah.
So I never really formed particularly close bonds to them.
But they plowed a furrow that you were expected to follow.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I never thought about it. I mean, if you like, I probably accepted to some extent my mother's notion that this life is a sort of an antechamber, you know, a waiting room for the next life.
Yeah.
You know, and so you balance it up and you say, okay, 70 years roughly here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there's eternity, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Well, so are you going to do what's going to make things really good and never, forever and ever? Or are you going to have a good time here and then you're going to, you know, burn in hell for the rest of eternity? So
but
it's an easy thing to make up your mind. And besides that, there's an unspoken expectation that you would become a priest.
Yeah.
You know? And I guess I opted for it myself, you know.
But no, don't go there yet. What is it going to say? Right, the two brothers. Was it three boys? No, was it three boys?
Yeah, 3 boys.
Yeah, and you were the third, right? That's the first two, right? Michael, was he the family genius or something?
Aye, Michael was the middle one. Well, he wasn't. I don't think he was a genius. Is a genius. He's still alive. But he was very, very bright. And I think part of the reason was this. when he finished the primary school in Noma, the Christian Brothers, he
Yeah.
went for 2 years or a year and a bit to the secondary school, the grammar school,
Yeah.
Christian Brothers. And when he was halfway through his second year, my uncle, the priest in Ballinasgreen in Draperstown, said to my mother, if he wants to become a priest in Derry Diocese, he'll have to go to St. Column's.
Yeah.
So next thing, Michael found himself sent to St. Column's.
Yeah.
And I think he repeated that first year.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it. I think that was part of his academic success was he felt very secure because he really knew his stuff. This is his second time around on the first year in St. Columns, doing the curriculum, twice.
Yeah.
So he was very, very good, very, very clever. He got he passed his 11 plus. He got over 80. I remember when he did the junior, he got all distinctions and maybe 2 credits. And then he did his senior and he got an exhibition, which is the kind of thing that Hugh Massini got. I mean, he was as bright as could be. And you could see it in the clergy because when he was finished 3 years in Maynooth, he was sent to Rome. And in those days, it was guys who looked like they'd really got qualities to go somewhere, i.e. maybe become a bishop or something. Were sent to Rome.
Rome to finish them off, as it were.
That's right. That's right. Well, a finishing school. Yeah. That's the truth in that.
Yeah.
But that was them.
And what about the other brother?
Well, I think he was actually in some ways he was brighter, but not. He wasn't as academic. He was really interested in stuff. For example, we all were taught the piano. Right? But none of us were worth a damn at it. My brother Michael was taught the violin, and he was even worse.
Yeah.
But my brother Paddy, the one who wasn't taught, the other brother, the non-genius brother, he taught himself to play a recorder.
Yeah.
He had any number of books lying around the house by authors I'd never heard of. J.B. Priestley and Agatha Christie, James Thurber, all sorts of people. I couldn't, that's what I was fed. I used that to fend off the boredom of being essentially solitary on the farm. So he was good that way. He also he was interested in scientific things like, the law of this idea that you'd come younger if you traveled at twice the speed of light or whatever.
Right, you go back,
and he was sort of open to chatting in that way a bit. So although he wasn't getting the marks or anything that my other brother got, in other ways he was quite intelligent.
Yeah, but does that mean does that, with respect, that suggests to me that the Collinses were a nice bourgeoisie family? You weren't like back in the 1930s and 40s. Like I know from my own parents, it was sort of like a council house. The Catholic families big families just didn't have money. You like the fact that you were boarding school, that the sort of just the way you were chatting, like learning music or being taught music and so on. So that all shapes you, doesn't it?
No, that's true. That's true. When I look back now, we definitely were solidly comfortable. Now that can be sort of a bit confusing. Like my father would have had a car, but it was always a very modest car.
But it's still a car.
We were brought up in a big house, a biggish house. But again, it wasn't a palatial place. It was a house, but furniture was pretty ordinary. I suppose I was better off than I realized I was at the time. We never thought of ourselves as being particularly rich. I don't know. My father was a very good cattle dealer, and he must have, in the time he was spent in Scotland, I was telling you my 2 eldest siblings were born in Glasgow. He must have made money then, because when he came back, he was able to buy a house in Castlederg, and then he was able to buy this house that I was brought up in, which was a big house. And in fact, he had to get a Protestant to do the bidding for him in the auction, so he could get the house. Otherwise, he wouldn't allowed it to pass out of Protestant hands.
Absolutely. Richard, see, when you were growing up in that part of Omagh or outside of Omagh, you know the Derry where it's considered the cradle, that's upside down, by the way.
Just testing.
The cradle of the Troubles was supposed to be Derry, What
Yes.
was Oma? Was there much sectarianism in Oma back in the day?
Well, there wasn't sectarianism, Pat. It was just division. Like, there was right beside us, and I talk about this in some detail. There was a council housing with 100% Protestant kids and
Yeah.
families. Just right, literally over the fence. Now, they're all prefab houses, so they're quite modest. Some of the girls from there would come over and play with my sisters, and they would do houses and stuff, wee dolls' houses, and they used to climb up in the hay along with them because there would be the hay shed right beside it. And I used to be very friendly with one of the boys. I remember him well, Gon Cleary was his name, and he was a really nice, gentle sort of a boy. He wasn't very
Uh,
manly, but he was a nice lad. But every year, I think I may have told you this before, every
uh,
year, come near my birthday, early July, anytime from certainly the 10th, maybe even earlier than that, the visits of my sister's friends and the visit of my friend, this guy, Gordon Cleary, would taper off.
yeah.
So that on the 12th, halfway through me getting the ice cream and jelly, which was my mother's idea of a birthday party, we would hear stones banging against our hay shed. And we would
Uh,
run out, say, "Hey, what you doing?" And
uh,
they would start shouting, "You fucking Fenian bastards, yeah." So the people that we were, at least on civil terms with, and in
yeah.
some cases, friendship terms, were now lined up throwing stones and insults. Now,
Yeah.
I have to say, I've said this by Gone Cleary. I remember him well. He really, his heart wasn't in it. I could tell
Yeah.
it from the way he stood there. He was almost blushing, and he was opening his mouth and pretending to shout obscenities, but I don't think there was any words coming out at all.
Yeah.
But that lasted for about another 2 days after the 12th. We fired stones at them. They cursed us. We cursed the Queen. And then after about 2 or 3 days, into 13th maybe of July, things eventually came back to normal. So
Yeah.
it impressed on me one thing, that the 12th as a festival was definitely bad for people. It was bad for them and it was bad for us.
Yeah. And did that shape you in any way? Did that give you certain viewpoints, do you reckon?
No, I didn't. No, it didn't really. No, it didn't. Because as I say, the friendships would resume. I mean,
But
friendships sound very
no,
big.
stop you a second. No, you referred to a guy, Gon Cleary, whatever his name was.
Aye.
Have you ever met him? Do you know what happened to him?
I
And
haven't a clue.
have you gone back to chat to him now? Would he talk to you?
Well, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would. I mean, I didn't leave him in bad terms. It's just you lose contact with people,
Yeah.
He was going to a different school for one thing, and then I went off to St. Column's at 11, so
Yeah.
it's natural
Yeah.
enough that you wouldn't see much. No, it didn't wound me, but it was just that was par for the course. That was the way it was. If you
Yeah.
like when I come out to the end of our lane to get the bus to go into the town, into the school, the Protestant kids would be there waiting for their bus, for the same bus, but going into
Yeah.
a different school. And if I was on my own, I mean, the chances were pretty damned high I get pushed around. I
Yeah.
can remember very well being pushed into a hedge by a wee skitter of a guy.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to hit him because I knew the others would pile into me. So
Yeah.
that kind of thing, I used to hate going out to the end of the lane. But it didn't scare me. It really
But
didn't.
no, there's obviously a psychological term of if I knew my fried or something. But surely there's a sort of osmosis. You're taking it in, and you don't realize you're taking it in.
Not a bit. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. My father was a cattle dealer, as I said, and
Yeah.
he dealt with Protestants as well as Catholics. And my mother was very strong on this. Never say anything bad to a Protestant.
Yeah.
Your father has to work with all types of people, and you've got to be. So it was a commercial reason, not a sort of
Moral
not a
reason.
goodwill reason.
Yeah.
So not to be saying bad. And I remember some of the Protestant men who would have come into our house and been
Yeah.
talking to my father or gone off for deals with him or
Yeah.
whatever. And they were lovely guys. Some
Yeah.
of them were really, really nice and
Yeah.
shy and just
Yeah.
good people. I'm sure there were buggers among them as well, but I didn't grow up with the idea Protestants are bad people, but I did
Yeah.
grow up with the idea that the 12th of July was a bad time, and
Yeah.
also it was bad to be outnumbered with a bunch of kids. Of course, There's lots of fights in the Christian Brothers primary school yard as well
Yeah,
between Catholics.
yeah,
Violence was in the air. It wasn't
yeah.
necessarily confined to Protestants and
But
Catholics.
do you not think that, by any chance, under any circumstances, that know the person you are today, that those childhood experiences shaped your political beliefs?
I know. It's a good idea, Pat. I'm sorry, but it didn't. Well, I'll tell you why I say that. When I came back from Canada in I was in Canada during most of the 70s, and I came back in 1979. I was prime material. I would have signed up to the Alliance Party like a flash if somebody asked me. I
Yeah,
really thought that this was, sectarian nonsense and people were people. And in fact, the place I began to live in and still live in was a place where 97% of the population were Protestant.
yeah,
So it clearly didn't leave any grudge against Protestants. But
yeah,
over time being here, and after the 70s ended, and we got into the hunger strikes, and we got into Bloody Sunday, or the impact of Bloody
yeah,
Sunday over the years. I began to do a wee bit of thinking about what politics was and why it was the way it was. But that didn't make me opposed to Protestants. It made
yeah,
me opposed to unionism, which is a different
yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
sorry, Pat. Sorry, Pat. I know you're a.
No, I was just doing me amateur psychologist there.
I
I
was
was
just
just
gonna say, good
right, Jim.
try, good
Right, no,
try.
you mentioned earlier on at aged 11 you were sent off to St. Column's.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
That was bad.
Surely that must have been traumatic.
That was bloody awful, Pat. I
Yeah,
see. I used to hear my brothers talking about St. Columns, and they'd always be talking about funny stuff. Oh, you remember
yeah,
the day so and so did that? Oh, I
yeah,
remember the time they did that. Oh, it was great. Oh, God, it was a laugh, wasn't it? So I thought I was going to a kind of a Billy Bunter's Greyfriars type school. Uh, oh, Jesus,
How
it was
naive were you?
nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Yeah,
Violence was laced throughout the place.
yeah,
There was, punch ups between boys were quite common. There was a thing
yeah,
called take you to the jinx was the word
uh,
we used for the jacks or the toilets.
uh,
There was two sort of sets of outdoor toilets, sort of,
yeah,
and you were taking if you said that to somebody, what you meant was come up and I'll fight you, I'll punch you. So that was quite popular because it broke the boredom.
uh,
And it was really great if somebody else was getting their head bashed in, not you. But inevitably, you find yourself in that situation too. So
yeah,
you had at the bottom level, you had violence. You had prefects. Every year, the authorities selected 12 prefects for the
uh,
borders, and their job was to keep law and order, to
uh,
keep young, especially junior boys, behaving themselves and not breaking any of the petty rules like playing
yeah,
football in the wrong place or anything like that. And they administered their enforcement with a fairly iron rod. They used to
yeah,
take boys into the library and essentially slap the face off them.
uh,
12 of them, maybe a small, young fella, maybe 14, and
uh,
12, 17 or 18-year-olds, slap them around.
uh,
So that was bad. And then, of course, I'm sure you know the same thing for your school, St. Eunan's.
uh,
Corporal punishment was the norm. A strap
uh,
was there all the
uh,
time for
yeah,
most teachers, and slapping somebody around the face wasn't seen as any terrible crime by any teacher.
yeah.
It was,
No.
you got to keep order. So there
So,
you are. That's
so
why
your memories of St. Columns are not sugar coated in any way.
No, they're not. Although I have to confess, in the last year I was there, I enjoyed it. And the reason I enjoyed it was the teachers had started to treat you in a reasonable way, almost like a human being, which is
Yeah,
pretty surprising and delightful after
yeah,
5 years of the other. And the other thing was, there was nobody in the place among the boys that were going to beat you up because you're probably one of the toughest guys in it because you're one of the oldest
yeah,
in the place. And I fond memories of that last year. I formed a friendship with a guy called Paddy McWilliams, and I do remember that time and I talk about it in the book. In the
yeah.
book, get the book, uh,
Uh,
uh, with fondness. That was
yeah.
one of the best years of my life. The last year there,
Uh,
but apart from that,
Jude, you were there at the sorry for interrupting you, but you were there at the same time as a certain Nobel Prize winner,
Shibasini.
Jimmy.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and
yes, and
and
and he was older
are you
than
going
me.
to
He
tell
was
the
about
story, or are you going to keep it for?
Well, let's say he was three. I think he was third. Was he 3 or 4 years older than me, right?
Yeah.
And I had an encounter with him, shall I say, which I'd rather
You
not have
relate
had.
in the book.
It's in the book. If you
Yeah.
want to find out what happened between me and Seamus Heaney, a Nobel Prize winner, read the book. I better still
What was
buy
going
the book. And
to,
then read.
was Hume gone at that stage?
Oh yeah, Hume. I think Hume was my brother's year actually,
Yeah.
and my brother, my middle brother, left St. Column's the year I came to it. You know, he
Yeah.
left in June, I came in September. And my
Uh,
brother, incidentally, was a head prefect.
uh,
Another sign of his brilliance, you know.
uh,
Just as Heaney was head prefect. But if you want
uh,
to find out what happened,
right. Tell me, what else? Who else was there in your era?
well, Owen Kelly, who used to write for the Irish News a lot, he had a
Yeah.
column and lots of people speak, oh, Owen Kelly was great. And I remember him well. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, yes, two brothers of Martin O'Neill, you know, the
Yeah.
manager, Leicester
The
manager.
soccer manager.
Two of his brothers, they were both very athletic.
Uh,
We're from Kilray. They were both very athletic, but they were much older than me, and you just didn't have anything to do with them much, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
But right,
oh,
Jude,
Phil Coulter was there too. Phil Coulter was there.
I was hearing, yeah. But then, of course, there's lots of people hanging around Derry these days. Wasn't Jerry Downey and
Oh yeah,
Marius Harkin and all those guys?
yeah. Jerry Downey was there. Paddy Logue was there. Well, I didn't really know them then in St. Column's. Well, I knew who they were, like, but I wasn't friendly with them because both of those were a year older than me.
Yeah.
I knew Marius well enough because Marius was my year.
Yeah.
But yeah, loads of guys.
Right. We're moving down into 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. The final part of this book ends when you went off to Maynooth.
Uh,
What made you decide to go to Maynooth? Because the brothers had gone there.
yes, I suppose so.
What I'm asking, how long did you have a vocation, or were you being channeled down that path?
Well, I discussed that in the book actually. If you want the
Yeah.
answer to that again,
Yeah.
I certainly was being channeled into it, and I remember having arguments with my mother about her assumption that I was going to go on to Maynooth.
Yeah.
I used to get ratty with her about it.
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is, I went to Maynooth, but I really didn't want to go to Maynooth. I mean, well, that sounds very clear cut, but that's what it came down to in the end, I think. And I certainly
You know,
couldn't
there's
get
this film. It's called Sliding Doors.
Oh
It's
yes,
where people make choices. Sometimes even they don't realize they're making choices.
yeah.
I read your book, and part of me thinks half of you wouldn't have minded being a priest.
Oh, geez, I don't agree. I don't think that's right, Pat. I'd have liked a bit of the power, bossing
No, but
people around.
you would have liked. I think if I read the book correctly, towards a priest made the decision for you, and you didn't seem very happy about it.
Well, it was a shock to the system. Look, I don't want to spoil it for the readers who,
Yeah.
I have to have a reason. I have to have a reason for buying the book.
This is not a spoiler because it's an interesting thing. You know, when the sense that somebody goes off, you were following in a train and you went off on a totally different tangent. Then you ended up becoming a teacher and you went off to Canada and you had a different life.
That's right, and I'm delighted that was what happened, because I think if I had gone on and become a priest, it would have been, well, my life would have been much narrower than it is.
Right, stop now.
Okay.
Tell them when the launch of the book, where it is and when it is.
This book has been launched in Belfast already last Saturday. It will be launched this coming Saturday, the 10th of December, in Derry Central Library, which is in Foyle Street. And you can bring money clutched in your hot little hand, or you can bring a credit card. Either of the two. We'll take your money in any form. And it's a really, by the way, it's a great, get 3 copies and you can send them as presents to your friends.
But hold on, tell them what time it.
Oh, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Remember now, 2 o'clock, Central Library in Derry, Foyle Street. Saturday, the 10th of December.
Yeah,
okay?
Jude, best of luck.
Thanks very much,
on the
Pat.
12th of July on Saturday.
Okay.
I'll see you there.
See you there.
You're still recording.
I know that. I'm trying to find the thing. Okay, here we go.